Next on AABJ's In Contact. As the holidays approach, it's also a special time to remember the less fortunate and those experiencing homelessness. Coming up, we'll take a closer look at the situation in Atlanta and what's being done about it.
Be informed, you gotta know what's going on in our community. So together we can make a change, you and me. Be in contact.
Welcome to In Contact, Atlanta Association of Black Journalists award-winning public affairs program that brings you community news you can use. I'm your host, Paisley Moore. While we're out and about going through town, we often see homeless individuals sitting or sleeping on the cold corners, wrapped in blankets in the parks or huddling together to keep warm. It's a harsh reality that homelessness is a part of our communities. According to an article written earlier this year in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Atlanta's homelessness rate dropped 38% before the pandemic. The article says those findings are from a survey administered by Partners for Home, a nonprofit organization created by the city of Atlanta in 2013 that works to fight against homelessness. Meanwhile, the Georgia Virtue reports this year in Georgia, an estimated 10,234 people are experiencing homelessness. That's about 9 people for every 10,000 people. That's the 20th lowest homeless rate among the states. Homelessness is on the rise in the United States, according to the National Alliance to End Homelessness. The nonprofit organization's latest research shows just over 580,000 people nationwide experienced homelessness in January 2020 alone. Most were individuals, just at about 70%, and the remaining were people with families and children. That's about 30%. Contributing factors are tied to higher unemployment rates, low income, less access to health care, and higher incarceration rates. Since the pandemic, the numbers are staggering as studies are continuing to take place. But while hope on the home front is looking better, many say there's still some work to be done. In Contact's Tyreek Wynn joins us now in studio with more. Tyreek.
Thanks, Paisley. The homeless community continues to struggle for survival daily. There are numerous resources available to assist them, ranging from shelters to pantries to transitioning and educational programs, job training, and more. We spoke with an author and professor from Georgia State who wrote a book on homelessness to get her take on the issue. There are countless homeless individuals within Metro Atlanta, but what's the cause of homelessness? Professor Elizabeth Beck with the Georgia State University School of Social Work at the Andrew Young School of Policy Studies says a lack of adequate public housing in Atlanta since the 80s is part of the blame.
Homelessness fundamentally is an issue of housing. We've seen public housing being destroyed here in Atlanta, which is touted as a good thing because it breaks up concentrated poverty, but in reality, it leaves a lot of people homeless.
Professor Beck says there is not enough investment into basic necessities, and wages are not good enough for people to stay afloat. She's actually written a book on the issue.
Our book is called The Homelessness Industry, and fundamentally what we argue in that book is because we don't invest in public resources with a special eye towards housing, but not only housing, and we don't have wages that keep up with the cost of housing, we perpetuate and manufacture the condition of homelessness. So no matter how much we are able to help some people, new people fall into homelessness.
A lot of homeless people struggle to stay alive. In fact, research shows some homeless people end up getting arrested on purpose.
Historically and presently, jail has always acted as a shelter for homeless people.
Atlanta has a wide range of resources to help the homeless, from shelters and nonprofits, community support groups to public housing, and more. But according to Beck, better efforts ahead are needed to put an edit to the problem.
If we're going to help eliminate homelessness, that's got to be through policy. And it's got to be through federal and state and city policy that supports the development of housing and supports for low-income people.
Meanwhile, it's very important to continue to spark awareness about the homeless issue and share information and resources with those in need. Paisley, back to you.
Thanks, Tyreek. Now, if you know of someone who is experiencing homelessness, they can visit the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. The website is dca.ga.gov to get connected with resources and information. When we come back, we'll take a deeper dive into homelessness and the mental health challenges that it leaves behind. You're watching Atlanta Association of Black Journalists in Contact. Don't go away. We'll be right back in a moment. Welcome back to AABJ's In Contact. Today we're talking about the plight of homelessness in the metro Atlanta area. It's also important to speak about the mental health aspects as well. So joining me now is Ernest Benson, a licensed professional counselor with Infinite Life Counseling here in Georgia. Ernest, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's just start off from the top. Just explaining your background with counseling and what you see in a hospital setting.
Okay. My background, I've been working with the social services for probably 15 years. In the last 5 years, I've worked through hospitals, mental health hospitals, and we often see people that come in with different episodes, whether it's bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, suicidal attempts, things of that nature. When you talk about the homeless population, we're talking about people that may have been on substances, they may have episodes, and then they come to the hospital to get treatment. Oftentimes when they receive the treatment, within a week or 7 days, 10 days maybe, once their episodes or their symptoms subside, then they don't have anyone to pick them up. They don't have family that comes to pick them up. They don't have their own home, so they may end up going back to a shelter.
Okay, and let's talk about, going back to the substance aspect and mental health, how they may play a role, substance and, alcohol and drug abuse may play a role with homelessness.
Well, a lot of times what happens with substance use is that instead of getting the medication that they need, then they will use substances to kind of help them feel normal or help them feel better.
Self-medicate.
They self-medicate, whether it's alcohol, whether it's marijuana, whether it's a combination of alcohol and marijuana or other drugs on top of that. And the problem that happens is that once you start increasing the substance use, you have a mental health condition, then you also have a substance condition. So you have co-occurring disorders. So from my perspective and from the clinical perspective, we have to treat the substance before we can get to the mental health. So you have two different things that you're dealing with at that particular time.
And besides mental health and substance abuse, there may be some other causes that leads to homelessness?
Well, yeah, looking like there are a lot of different causes of homelessness. Stress tolerance, a lot of people lose their jobs. A lot of people have grief or people die and then they just can't take it based on the trauma and the trauma experience. So based on the statistics that I found, you have 81% of people that have experienced physical or sexual abuse. 58% of people that have symptoms from trauma or experiences of trauma. 57% have medical conditions that may have taken their finances or their life, their savings, because that one medical condition for any of us without insurance could be quite expensive and it could lead to homelessness. So there are a lot of different things that happen, a lot of different scenarios for a lot of different people.
Okay, and then going back to those who may come to the hospital to get help but find themselves
back
going
in the shelter?
Back, yes. And you were talking about the sheltered and maybe the unsheltered homeless. Can you tell us the difference with those?
Well, in Georgia, in the Atlanta area, there are a lot of different organizations that provide shelters every night. There are organizations that will help people that are homeless get apartments and give them mental health training as well, so they can get off the street. But a lot of times, only 50 to 60% of those beds may be used because they would prefer to stay on the street. And there's a lot of distrust. There's a lot of distrust with the system. A lot of times with the homeless population, because they've accumulated stuff and that's all they have, they have a fear that stuff being taken, the things being taken. So if you go to a shelter and you go to sleep and you wake up and somebody has stole your stuff, then there's a conflict, So it's like, do I go to get housing or take the shelter or take the risk of having my stuff stolen? So there are a lot of different variables to take into consideration. But Georgia does provide a lot of services and a lot of support for them.
Now let's talk about those resources. Some are a little known to some people, so if you could just, maybe break down some resources that are available to them.
As I mentioned, the apartments, like there's a program called 3 Keys. There's an organization called 3 Keys, and they provide apartments. They can get people that are homeless off the street. They can get them mental health counseling. They can help them find jobs, work, study, vocational training. And as long as they're in the program, then they can maintain their apartment. You have programs like the Department of Community Affairs has a lot of different programs as well for homeless population. You have the Atlanta Union Mission. They provide housing and they also provide food and shelter on a consistent basis. Then because a lot of times people don't think about the children and the adolescent population. There's an adolescent population in Atlanta that's very high too for homeless people. So for them, you have the Covenant House that provides housing and programming to help them get jobs, help them get their GEDs. So Atlanta has a significant amount of resources for the homeless population that people may not know or may not take advantage of.
And like you said, some people may not know. Well, there also is some apprehension towards getting help or counseling.
Right.
Can we talk about, maybe the apprehension and the alternatives to maybe they don't want to go in person to get help?
Yeah,
for counseling.
in general for counseling or homeless
For
or just in general. A lot of people have apprehension. We have, the stigma of mental health or the stigma of being mentally ill or needing counseling. A lot of people feel like it's a weakness or I can make it on my own, I can do this on my own. So getting people to come get the help that they need or seek the help for myself and other clinicians and therapists is a challenge, and we have to educate people and try to make sure they're comfortable and make sure they seek help.
And how do you do that? I remember you speaking before at one point about how you get some people who may be in denial about maybe a mental health issue that they're battling.
Well, like I said before, you have to even show them the criteria, maybe kind of give them what I do.
Okay.
Like, let me pull up the criteria and maybe show them what is required or what the symptoms may be for this particular diagnosis. And after we go through it and say there are 9 different factors, if they recognize that they have 5 or 6 of those factors, then the light bulb will go off in their head, like, okay, maybe I do have this, or maybe I do need to get some help, or maybe I need to get some services to get better. Even we all know what's really going on with us. Whether we want to admit it to, whether I admit it to you or not, we recognize what's going on. So once you can really identify it, then you say, okay, how can I get better? What do I do? And that's why services come in, because I can provide tools for you. I can provide different trainings. I could also use psychoeducation to educate you as to how you got here, why you got here, some different factors that have led you to where you are. So that's what we do in terms of counseling. And even though it's just talking, it's very difficult for people to talk. And understanding that people don't like to feel vulnerable. So that's the scary part. How do I know that you're going to take my information, you're not going to misuse it, or you're not going to say anything to anyone else?
Okay, and then it seems like you think the first step is identifying that within yourself.
Correct.
And what would be maybe the next step once you've said something might be going on? What can they do next to maybe address that problem? As far as reaching out, do they go to a hospital first, or
you can go to, it depends on what the situation is. If it's something that, let's say you may have some suicidal ideation, you may be thinking about harming yourself, then you would definitely need to go to ER. If you have a family member that can encourage you or take you to the hospital, that would be even better. Sometimes your depression can last for longer than 2 months, a month.
Well, let's get into that in just a minute, talking about depression and the holidays are coming up.
Correct.
So we're going to get into that. But before we do, we're just talking about homelessness again and how to recognize and curtail that problem. So with the holidays coming up, we're going to talk about the holiday blues and homelessness. And we'll be right back after this short break. We're speaking with Ernest Benson, a licensed counselor here in Georgia, who's providing some information on how to help the homeless and how mental health may play a role with that. Now, Ernest, the holidays are here, and oftentimes it becomes a tricky time for many people for various reasons, but in this case, especially the homeless. What's your take on that situation?
What we call, it would be seasonal affect disorder. So a lot of times, man, people have different responses to the holiday season. You may have a death in the family that someone may have died during Christmas or Thanksgiving. So for you, it's not a time when you want to celebrate because it's sad. Also, we have people that may have substance abuse disorders. The holidays get lonely for them because typically when they go around in festive events, they drink. So they find themselves being lonely and isolating and staying at home. So what I encourage people to do is either try to, especially with substance abuse, try to find a sober living event where they are festive, but at the same time, they're not going to have any alcohol.
No triggers or
no
anything
triggers,
like that.
Right. Then we talk about people with mental illness that may have anniversaries of death or things like that. You try to encourage them to be around their support system, identify your support system, and try to make sure you're not alone during this time.
Okay. Now, going back to what you see in some patients who may come to the hospital for mental health help, but they end up back on the streets and they come back. How do you all approach that for some of the homeless population who you may see recurring?
Yeah, we call them repeaters. We really just try to encourage them to try to get involved with something outside of the hospital. There are a lot of different programs. NAMI does a great job with providing a lot of group activity. There are other organizations that provide group services within the community. So if you can utilize those programs, then it will prevent you from using the hospital as a way to balance yourself.
Right.
And if you have a psychiatrist or a therapist that can kind of do med management for you to make sure you're getting your medication, you're taking it on a consistent basis, and just do a regular checkup, that kind of helps keep them consistently on the right level, or balanced.
Right, balance and not using the hospital as a crutch, as you said. And, you know, with counseling, I'm sure you provide tips on how to cope and things like that. And how effective do you think counseling is?
I think it's really effective. But at the same time, counseling is only as effective as your level of participation. So if you're not doing the homework, if you're not making the changes outside of just us talking, then it's not going to be as effective as it could. Because what we're trying to do is remove negative habits or bad habits with positive habits. So if I'm giving you the tools and teaching you how to make the changes, it's on you, the individual, to make the changes in your everyday life. You know.
Right. And sometimes some people say it's easier said than done, or they're used to being on the streets.
Well, understand, it is easier said than done sometimes, but at the same time, you have to start somewhere and you have to try something. So if you're willing to try, and that's one of my mottos, like if you're willing to try, then I'm willing to listen, and we can grow together. So as long as you continue to come, I'm going to continue to give you tools and coping strategies, and then we're going to measure out of 7 days, were you able to do these 3 days, were you able to do it 4 days, and over time, then we can just increase the amount of days that you utilize your coping strategies and the tools that we're providing. Then we're going to maintain a longer life and a longer positive resistance.
And get on their road to healthy habits.
On the road to healthy living, right? Because it's a journey. Like, it's not going to happen overnight. You didn't get here overnight, so it's going to take a while for you to kind of replace your negative habits with positive habits. That's a real conversation. And you're still trying to maintain work-life balance because you still have stressors every day. You know, it's not like life is going to stop happening for you. So you're still going to have stress from jobs, stress from your family, different variations of stress that you have to manage as well while you're trying to remove those negative habits too. So. Yeah.
And then, you know, some people say they just became homeless to alleviate stress, getting away from bills, or
it's that there is a certain level, there is a certain percentage of the population that just does not want to be involved in the responsibilities of life. Like, they'd rather be free, like just
Yeah,
totally
and
free.
they're-
Yeah, they'd rather be totally free. So it's kind of difficult to get them to get to another level because that's their decision. You know, like I said before, you can't force counseling on people. It's a voluntary act. Like they have to want it. Now the court can mandate it. You know, if you get in such trouble, if you get in so much trouble, and the court mandates that you go to a drug program or rehab program, then they can mandate you that you go. But that's going to create some resistance as well because you're grown, and then the court is telling you what to do.
Right. Well, let's look at, you know, the light at the end of the tunnel.
For sure.
Now, earlier in the show, we reported that the homeless rates were actually decreasing
Correct.
in the Atlanta area. What's your reaction to that? Some good news, I guess.
Yeah, it is. It's good, but at the same time, one of the things that you have to recognize is that a lot of the reports happen on one night out of the year. So there's an organization that goes out on the coldest night of the year and actually checks in with the homeless people to get the numbers. So the numbers are decreasing, but it's really based on one sample size, like one night. So outside of that one night, how do we know if it's really decreasing or not? You know, so it's kind of hard to say.
And I wanted to get your take on something that happened not too, maybe kind of recently, where there was an area of Atlanta called Tent City.
Okay.
And they kind of just, you know, wanted to get rid of the eyesore.
Right.
Because Atlanta is obviously a bustling population
Right.
and is attractive for so many various reasons. And they were like, you know what, we kind of gave y'all some warnings and now we're just wiping your stuff away.
Right.
What impact do you think that has on some of those people who got their stuff just wiped away? And
But
that's-
it had a major impact because first of all, you're homeless and you're just surviving on the street on a daily basis. You know, so all the things that you've accumulated, now all of a sudden you come back to where you call home and everything is gone. All your merchandise, the tent's gone, everything is cleared out. So it's like starting all over, starting from scratch. So that's frustrating for anyone. You know, if I lose my house and everything was gone, then like it would be devastating. So for a person that's already homeless and already struggling on a daily basis to lose everything, that's just like starting all over.
And then going back to, I guess, being on the streets in a way they may find something that's attractive about being on the streets, even if it is maybe risky.
Yeah.
What is your, I guess, your take on that?
I think everybody has to find their motivation. Like, what motivates you? What motivates us to do what we do? So identifying what motivates them and what kind of gives them that drive to change the situation. That's one of the things we have to identify.
Last but not least,
Yeah.
what advice would you give an individual who is going through a critical time and is afraid to ask for help?
I just always encourage people to reach out, seek the help that you need. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You know, in some way, in the African American community, we're comfortable with our past. A lot of times, we take a lot of things to the past, and we don't go seek therapy. But as a therapist, then I also have a relationship with my pastor. So in case somebody comes, then give them my number so they can call me. And then we kind of help them get the help that they need. Oftentimes, family members have to encourage people or friends. Like if you know your friend is struggling and they need help, encourage them to get help, or even drive them sometimes. Pick them up and take them yourself. You know, one of the things that creates anxiety for people is going into an office and like sharing all of your information and starting to tell people your thing, and it's a stranger.
Right, it's like
It's uncomfortable.
telling my business,
yeah,
right?
Like, yeah.
And-
So you know, a lot of us have grown up to where what happens in the house stays in the house, which leads to don't tell anybody what's going on with you. So now in this age of telehealth, it makes it a little more comfortable because you could be in your own home in the safety and the comfort of your own home, but then we're just talking through the computer, so it's less invasive for you. It's not as anxiety producing. Even though we're talking, you're still comfortable in your own setting.
Comfortability will end on that note. Ernest Benson with Infinite Life Infinite Life Counseling of Georgia. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Sure.
We appreciate your expertise, and we really hope that these helpful tips will be aiding you all as well. And that's our show for now. We appreciate you all for joining us here at AABJ. Please remember to stay connected with the Atlanta Association of Black Journalists on our Facebook and YouTube channel. Of course, stay in contact to stay informed. We'll see you back here next month.
Get it, slip it, cuff it, check it. Talk to doctor now and share it. Get it, slip it, cuff it, check it. Talk to doctor now and share it. Gonna get it, gonna slip it, gonna cuff it. Check it, talk to doctor and share it. Gonna get it, gonna slip it, gonna cuff it. Check it, talk to doctor and share it.
Get it, slip it, cuff it, check it. High blood pressure silently affects millions of Americans. Staying on top of your blood pressure is as simple as these 4 easy steps. Self-monitoring is power. Visit manageyourbp.org to learn more.